We are now moving into our first briefing items. Up first is the 2019 Capital Bond. Dr. Swift, would you like to introduce this one?
Thank you, Madam President and trustees. I'm actually going to share this item because, trustees, we've been working on our 2019 bond for quite some time. So we went with a very streamlined look this evening. Certainly we can plow as deep and wide as the trustees will like, but we didn't feel that was necessary. Three things we should remember. First of all, that capital bonds are the only way in the state of Michigan to fund capital investments to our property. The sinking fund is designed for maintenance and upkeep, and our daily operating budget, as you could hear from so many earlier, has been under fire for more than a decade. So really, capital bonds are the way. Michigan is one of only 11 states in the country where there is no state funding for buildings. We have to have our community support us in order to take care of our physical properties. The only other option, trustees, would be to use general fund. And you know, when you see our data, you know that more than 90% of our overall budget is dedicated to people, to salaries and benefits. So we want to preserve that general fund budget. We know that our current bond paid out its final payments to us last year in 2018. So folks out there might say, well, this is just not the right time to think about it. Actually, trustees, you know well, you don't have any choice but to think about it now, because we have spent, we have been paid all of the payments from the prior bond. We were very grateful in May of 2017 to receive an increase, the support from our community for an increase in the sinking fund. That was key and critical. But a reminder for all of us, that is for maintenance and repair of our facilities. It does not allow the kinds of funds that we require to really renew our infrastructure, to update our buildings. The next reality that we know is that our buildings are aged and our infrastructure is in dire need of support. So we have been preparing, trustees, for quite a long time for this part of the district cycle of needing to consider a significant investment in our infrastructure. And Ms. Hilton is going to just help me review on the next slide. This will be very brief, trustees, but I just want to lay out as a reminder what we've been doing. The board asked 2 years ago for a comprehensive external assessment of our facilities. That was back in 2017. Our team went out, we hired an external company that would give us an objective view, a comprehensive assessment of every single one of our 34 properties. The second thing we've done is, since December, we've been reviewing with the board. The board has been discussing both at committee and at this table all of the possible financial scenarios. We've looked at everything possible in terms of what would be the best choice for the district at this time. We've been engaged in presentation and discussion with the Board of Education over at least 2 years. Most recently, trustees, and you all have been briefed in one-on-ones. You've received by email, so we won't go through it tonight, but I want the community to know we conducted a survey of possible voters, 500 possible voters, in our upcoming election, and we got their opinion. As you know, trustees, that was a strong response from our voters that said, yes, we should think about this bond. Not only did they answer an unequivocal yes, but they answered a yes to that $1 billion number, which for all of us, I believe, is a shocking number at first. And yet, when you think about a 30-year plan for the district, 10 to 15 years of vigorous construction and enhancement, we know that $1 billion over 34 buildings to do the kind of work to recreate our learning environments for the 21st century is very important. So this evening, that brings us to this evening, to our first briefing on the 2019 bond recommendation. These are the conclusions from all of the work that we've done over the previous 2 years. And even before that, we know that our Ann Arbor Public Schools community values a quality education for every child on every day. We also know our current reality is that our buildings and grounds are aging and they're in need of major, significant capital investment. We know that the quality of the built environment, Mr. Lautzana has shared with you all data over several months that shows that the air quality, the HVAC quality, certainly we've been reminded of the water quality, all of the natural light in buildings, all of that impacts student achievement and the core mission of the district. We also take a moment at the beginning of every consideration of a bond or a millage to think about what generations before, trustees who sat in your seats over decades prior to now, made difficult decisions. And as a result, we have 34 beautiful buildings and we have amazing properties. And we know that we receive these as a gift from previous generations. We also know that it is now our responsibility to pay that forward. And paying it forward now means making an investment as good stewards in preparing our buildings for the future generations of students in the Ann Arbor Public Schools. We're excited about that mission. We're on that mission, and tonight is an important step. And so, trustees, as you are aware, it is our recommendation that the Board of Education consider the approval and placement of a 2019 bond in an amount not to exceed $1 billion to the school district's electors on November 5th, 2019. Trustees, at the back of your packet are the actual language in that would be placed on the ballot. I want to give a shout out to Trustee Lazarus and Trustee Lightfoot. Trustee Lazarus and I worked directly with the attorney. Trustee Lightfoot weighed in on the language as well, and we're proud to deliver that language this evening. And as you know, trustees, this is first briefing, and the next week we would have a second briefing and discussion if the board needs that, and then move toward a vote. So at this time, Madam President, again, we streamlined this. I will ask Ms. Helton to turn over to the costs, because I know, trustees, you've been deeply engaged in this. And let's go to the average. There we go. The average by home, and the first column, the second column actually, the first column are the average taxable values in each of our townships and in the Ann Arbor City. The second column are the current mills that we levy. I will remind folks that the Ann Arbor Public Schools levies by an immense amount the smallest levy of any district in our county. It's a fraction of the amount of the other districts. The third column is the additional that is being proposed, 1.65 mils. And then the final column would show the total amount on each of those averages. The next slide is one that we'll take out on our community tours. This is where we say to folks, you can find in here or multiply by 100,000 of taxable value. And we remind everyone that's watching, this is the taxable value, not the current market value. So make sure that you remember that distinction. Okay? That's it. Very good. So with that, trustees, you have in front of you the recommendation. You have the proposed ballot language. You are very familiar with all the ins and outs of this topic. Mr. Demeter is prepared for any questions you may have, and we're ready to receive those questions at this time. Thank you.
This is the need based on the facilities check we've done? Is that how we assign numbers?
So
to this?
on the first column, facilities condition assessment needs, that column, that is what the facilities assessment identified as a need. But the facilities assessment does not take into consideration a lot of other needs that the school district has that uses the bonds. For example, technology, which some we will bring tonight, or buses, or musical instruments. Those, if we want to include solar power on our schools or geothermal, those things have not been included in the study. Any additions to our existing schools due to enrollment growth has not been included. So the second column with the numbers, which is the other needs, addresses those additional needs that the school district has. So on the third column is basically the combination of those, what the facilities assessment has identified, and also those other needs that we have, which we identify on top of the facilities assessment. So the combination is about $1.4 billion. With the sinking fund, we cannot do equipment that is not attached to the building or the site. So, for example, we cannot buy buses. We cannot buy PCs. We cannot buy iPads. We cannot buy musical instruments. So all those things are not allowed with the sinking fund.
Thank you.
Trustee Gaynor, if I could clarify, the
Please.
bond is much more expansive. It's the sinking fund that's very, very narrow.
So we can use
The bond
the
to buy all
bond
those.
to purchase these items?
The purpose of the bond is to purchase technology, buses, furniture, musical instruments, all of those kinds of purchases that cannot be purchased with sinking fund. Sinking fund is really focused on repair of the building.
Oh, I had it, okay.
Yeah, you
So
just
I
had it back.
reversed.
That's right.
But we can use the bond for infrastructure plus these.
Yes.
Yes.
Do we need to list these items
We-
in the proposal?
Yes, and in fact, Trustee Lazarus may want to speak to it, but we actually did a really nice lengthy job of listing in the question all of those
Okay,
areas.
so
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, for some clarification. We worked really hard with the attorneys on this bond, on this ballot language, to be very, because if it's not in there, if it's not listed, then we cannot use, because bonds are very restrictive in how we use it. If it's not listed in there, then it's not eligible for use down the road. So we want to make sure that we were covered. And also, one of the things about this specific bond is that we would actually roll up our old bond, right?
That is correct.
So we would be consolidating. We have a current bond that's out there that has some money left over that is due to back for payment. We would actually consolidate it with this new bond so that we would be able to purchase these other items along with our physical facility needs also. So it's just it's kind of tidying up our finances on the bond level. So that's why those things are actually in there. So we don't have to continue to go back to the community and ask for another increase.
Trustee Johnson.
Thank you. So this is interesting timing because on the same night when we're talking about teacher contracts and we're talking about the capital bond and we heard even from the podium today some confusion about how money is spent. and Dr. Swift, you did touch on that, but Mr. Demetriou, can you talk a little bit about how this capital investment relates to what we're able to pay our personnel, and how, and you touched on this too, how additional costs that might come from not doing renovations could potentially impact that same pot as well?
Sure. With this money, one, it has to be accounted separately from our general fund. And there's a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is that all the money that is raised through a bond or a sinking fund, it is not allowed to be used on any of our employees. All the work, all the money must be spent on contracted work, non-employees. So, in essence, this money cannot be used for bargaining contracts and all those kind of things. The second part of your question is, if we don't have this money, how does that impact our operations, our general fund, basically? So, for example, there's needs of the school district, and climate change and air conditioning. That's one need. If we implement air conditioning, we know our costs will go up, and then the only way for us to kind of mitigate that is through alternative generating energy through geothermal or solar or combination of both, in order for us to afford from the general fund to pay for the air conditioning. Also, if the buildings need to be renewed, and at their average age of 63 years old, it is obvious through the study that they need a lot of work. And having inefficient equipment, then that breaks down all the time, and our utilities are higher, because all those things affect achievement, they affect everything. I hope I answered your question.
I would just add on that the increased expenses of older buildings eats into the general fund. And we've worked really hard to protect the general fund, because, as you noted, the state does not allow us to pass an operating millage. If only we could, we would. And I know the community would support it, because we all want our teachers to be paid better. And yet we're restricted since the law changed. So the past 2 decades, we've been restricted from passing operating. But what we are still allowed to do is to protect our general fund through the passing of sinking fund and capital. So I hope, go ahead.
Yeah, and there's other examples. For example, buses. The older the bus, the more inefficient it is, the more gas it uses, the more breakdowns, and that's all general fund money. There's lots and lots of examples that all their infrastructure and all their equipment are costing the general fund a lot more money.
We heard earlier today that teachers have desire for some other materials like textbooks. Are we allowed to buy things like that with this kind of bond?
No, we're not.
So that's still something that has to come specifically out of
It
the
has to
general
come
fund.
out of the general fund, depending on what the materials are. They might be allowed under at risk if it goes to a certain type of students, or Title I. It depends what it is. But if it's for the, I would say, general population, that would not be allowed in either one of those.
So it doesn't come from this
It
fund.
has to be general fund strictly, not even grants.
I appreciate that. I heard very quickly mentioned how how our current debt levy or the debt levy after this ballot would have us comparing to our neighbors and our peers. And I'm wondering if you could review that.
Absolutely. So our current debt levy is at 2.45 mils. And the next school district in a county is at least at 7. They range from 7 all the way up to 20. So even if this proposal is approved and passes in a community, it will be a 4.1, which again will be, it will still be about a 3 mil difference from the next, the second lowest in the county.
Thank you. I think that's really important to remember, so I appreciate you reminding us of that. And so then my last question is probably to my colleagues. Again, that number on slide 5, that's a number we've seen all along, and that includes the facility conditions and those non-FCA needs. And it's been that 1.4 number all along.
This slide 5 just demonstrates the need. How we get to the whole need is the combination of the sinking fund and the bond. Now, with when we ask the community, and we ask the community at the amount that we're recommending today, the support was approximately 72%. When we asked the community for a lower number, that dropped to about, which was the second, which was, I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it was approximately 1.25 mils, the increase. The support went down to 65%. Then when we asked at the 1 mil, the support went down to 56%. So
And I would interject, that's because in that 20-minute conversation, we talked about what you get at 1 billion and what you have to give up at the lower numbers. And it was overwhelming that people didn't want the part-way option.
the amount the community approves is up to $1 billion. And it does not mean that we get the $1 billion right away. There's going to be a variety of series. And part of it is once you receive the money, when you issue the bonds, let's just say we issue $100 million. If this passes, then we issue $100 million, let's say a few months later. We have 3 years to spend that money. And we, we will have the plans, what we're doing, and it is not a blank check. Anything that we do, it has to be included in those things. And there are a variety of regulations that we have to comply by. And one of them is we will have an audit on all the money spent every year. And that audit is filed to the Treasury Department. So we have to be very careful in this money is very, very restricted, and that whatever we say, we will do. So there is no leeway with this money.
But Mr. Demeter, would you speak specifically to the part of Trustee Johnson's question that was about we ask for the mills and then that backs to the billion?
No.
Okay, will you explain that for us?
Yes, we ask for the $1 billion. We ask for the amount. The millage is a calculation.
Okay.
And basically, the amount of money that is required to make the payments. So when we issue the bonds, there will be principal and interest that would have to be paid back. So I'm just going to use imaginary numbers, and let's just say we need $20 million to make that principal and interest. So in that $20 million equates to, let's just say, a couple mils, 2 mils. So we have 2 mils from this that we issued, but we also had, almost another 2.1 mils from the previous bond. So the combination, the 4.1, and will make the payment. So our calculations by issuing approximately, I believe, 4 or 5 series, different amounts, that we will keep it the same at 4.1, assuming a tax base grows next year 4.5%. This year grew up by 5.77%, and then after that is a 2.5% average. And in our estimates, and I used the previous bond issue that we had, which was $33 million. We assumed that it would take us 10 years at 2.45. And I'm pretty confident next year is going to drop significantly. So it's only been at the 5-year level versus our estimates were approximately the same as far as the growth of the tax base, and the tax base has been growing significantly higher than what we estimated. So the 4.1 is a very conservative number. It could actually be
Much lower, yeah.
lower.
Thank you.
So overall, it will be approximately 2049, 2050 when these bonds will be paid, completely paid, because the way they're going to be issued. Now, the construction schedule to spend the money will be approximately 20 years of construction to do everything, and I think Emil thinks maybe 15, I think more like 20.
Anything else, trustees? Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Demetrio.
Thank you.